What's going on, everybody? We are back at episode number 40 of the Club and Sub podcast. Tonight, we are going to talk about a mildly depressing card, which is Rozenstruik versus Gane. There's some spots, not many. We'll try to keep entertaining, keep the levity up. As usual, brought to you by Bet Online. To get 50% added bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000, go to Bet Online, enter a promo code CLUBSUB. They're, as we said before, the best MMA book there is. They get their props out earliest. They get their lines out earliest. They have lines all the way out to mid-April right now. So check it out, promo code CLUBSUB. And yeah, once again, please, if you guys enjoy the show, if you watch every week, drop a like and subscribe. I don't care if you follow us. I don't care if you fade us, whatever you got to do. But if you watch the show, please, it helps us out. We'd really appreciate it. And yeah, so tonight, C's not going to be with us. So we got Luke at SWR_MMA, myself at John Stringer at MMA Fox, and Lags at Lags_the Capper. So yeah, we're not gonna talk about last week at all. Curtis Blades, we're not gonna talk about it.
I think for the most part, people just had losing nights because most people had Blades pretty heavy, either inside the distance or in a parlay.
My reads were fantastic last week, and Blades basically broke me even. So that was fun times. But yeah, we'll go into it. Jump in. First fight of the night, we got Dustin Jacoby taking on Maxim Grishin. Luke, you want to start?
Yep. So first fight, first bet of the night for me. I got 2 units on Jacoby at -169. It wasn't originally a play that I was, necessarily looking to target, because I actually do give Grishin a bit more credit than most people. I actually considered a play against him against Tabura in full transparency. Obviously, that wouldn't have went particularly well. But largely my reasoning is even despite Jacoby being a guy who's fought down at 185, this is up at 205 now. Grishin has fought at heavyweight, so he's clearly, the bigger guy here. The problem I've always had with Grishin is that his volume just really isn't where it needs to be. And he's kind of largely just waiting on, kind of that big shot. He doesn't really push a pace on guys. And that's kind of where I think the edge for Jacoby comes. He's consistently shown to be active, obviously comes from that credentialed kickboxing background. In that, I honestly, I don't want to say just because, he chewed, in terms of Jacoby, he chewed Lidette's leg up. He's going to do that here. But honestly, I think that's pretty in play here for Jacoby to really beat up that lead leg of Grishin. He stands very flat-footed, doesn't utilize a whole lot of lateral movement just in general. He stands very heavy on that lead leg. Jacoby will switch stances. He targets the inside, outside of the leg. He'll go to it religiously. And I think that I'm not necessarily he's going to finish him with kicks, but what I think it will do is, wear on Grishin over the course of the fight. And I think by doing that, that's also going to set up the boxing of Jacoby as well in this spot, because I also don't think Grishin is great defensively necessarily. So despite Grishin, being the bigger guy, in having maybe some offensive wrestling upside, we have seen Grishin hit some nice throws and whatnot here and there. He could maybe just big brother him in this spot if that's kind of the game plan he takes, but historically it's not usually what he does. So I largely see it being, a range kickboxing match. And with that, I favor Jacoby, assuming he doesn't get blasted. I just think the minute winning ability of Grishin here is pretty limited. So I like the more active guy who I think also has some finishing potential here at -169.
Yeah, I have no play here. I thought I was going to play Jacoby. I don't really disagree with a whole lot of what you said. I guess my issue really is, look, the upside for Jacoby over 15 minutes is substantially higher than Griffin. The output alone. Plus, he's far more technically sound on the feet with both his boxing and kick game. The problem for me is, at the end of the day, we haven't really – I don't want to say we've never seen him tested, because obviously Jacoby's been in the UFC before, but we haven't seen him tested since his kind of return to MMA. Like, the guy basically took 6 years off of MMA to kickbox. And, Flores is a low-level regional fighter. Justin Lidette's got some nice tools, but, it's pretty bad. And then when he was last in the promotion and when he was in Bellator, Jacoby, that is, he really was pretty poor in the grappling. And it's that's something he potentially could have cleaned up. But, it's not – I haven't seen it, and so it's a bit concerning for me. I mean, on the other side, Grishin, I looked at him, just like, oh, maybe I'll play Grishin after I tape Jacoby. It's like, no, I can't do that. The output's just not there at the end of the day. Like, he hits hard, and, if he gets Jacoby on his back, I think he could potentially do damage. It's just that, like, if you were to look at it from, like, a perspective of actions per minute and actions per round, Grishin's are just so low, even with regard to the takedowns. Like, that's the clear path to victory for him here. But I mean, can you guys recall him attempting like 5 or 6 takedowns in a fight? Really? Like, I can't. 'Cause I was looking for it, like, even like back in the day. And so it's like, if you tell me he's going to attempt 3 to 4 over 15, it's like, well, maybe that's enough to get it done, or maybe Jacoby stuffs 3 and just pieces him up the rest of the way. So I kind of lean on the Jacoby side here, but it's a pass for me. Lags, how about you?
Yeah, I also lean on the Jacoby side too. I think the only thing that's really holding me back, and what's hopefully he cleans up in the future, is he's kind of heavy on the feet. He leaves his hands a little low, and that's kind of a huge issue for me. And then while he has like low-ish output, I think just in this matchup in general, Grishin doesn't really do a lot of anything. So I think that Jacoby's going to be able to out-volume him. But like in the future against higher-level competition, he's going to have to pump up the volume and work on his striking defense. But I like Jacoby here, and I like the line you got, Luke.
Yeah, agreed. Next fight, we have another weird one. Ronnie Lawrence coming off Contender Series. Vince Cachero coming off being a sacrificial lamb to Jamal Emers at a catch weight. Wags, got any opinions here? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually have a play here. I have one unit on Ronnie Lawrence at -160. I think that he can outstrike him on the feet, and I think he has a clear path to victory with the wrestling here. We saw Emers able to mix in the striking, mix in the wrestling, and able to get a ton of control time on him. So I kind of view it similarly. I think Ronnie's live for a KO finish if it stays on the feet. And yeah, that's about it. I like Ronnie. I don't think Cachero's anything too special. He's got decent boxing, but not great takedown defense.
Luke, come here.
Yeah, so second play, I'm just firing them all off back to back. Not a heavy slate for me, so I guess we'll get it out of the way early. I just want to give a quick shout out to my boy James, one of my patrons, is always in here in the chat. I'm going to give a shout out to my boy James. Appreciate you being in here, buddy. So yeah, second play for me is I got 2 units on Ronnie Lawrence at -155. I'm not in love with Ronnie Lawrence in general, but I'm also just pretty low on Cachero. Like, clearly he's fought, like in his L's, he's fought some solid comp. So, I mean, getting beat by Casey Kenny, short notice against Jamal Emers up a weight class, I get it. But from like a stylistic perspective, I just kind of struggled to see Cachero significantly winning minutes here. Like, I don't think he's overtly high output. He kind of has, like, he'll sit down on his punches, and like to Lags' point, like I think his boxing is actually decent, but the output just isn't there for me. And that's one thing we've seen from Lawrence, is that he's consistently active. At least in terms of mixing up his strikes as well. He'll kick a lot. He likes to utilize that teep to kind of keep range, targets the legs, kind of has that darting in and out style, where against a more stationary target who might be the more technically sound boxer in Cachero, I still think he's going to kind of have trouble tracking Ronnie Lawrence down. I think Lawrence does need to be cognizant of just the counter right hands, because he will fight with his hands down. He has shown to be hittable, but I think really the difference in the fight is the wrestling of Lawrence. I guess it looks like Lawrence and Jacoby. Pepe, bro, don't do it to me, dude. Come on. My slate's too small this week. We can't have any of that nonsense in here. No, that's good stuff though, Pepe. Anyway, though, I think the wrestling is going to be the difference here. I think it's something that Cachero has improved on slightly, because I did a pretty deep dive on him. But still, at the end of the day, Lawrence is going to shoot a ton of takedowns. I don't think Lawrence's wrestling or grappling proficiency is overtly high, but I think it's definitely enough for him to land multiple takedowns. And just even if he's not able to control Cachero on the ground, I think he can kind of play that blanket game too as well. So even get some grind time potentially against the cage. I just trust his activity a lot more. And despite him, me being somewhat hittable, he's shown to have solid durability. So I largely think Cachero is KO or bust. But even in saying that, I'm not laying, 3, 4, 5 units on Ronnie Lawrence here. It is still between two guys who are moderately inexperienced in their career, but I just think from a stylistic perspective, it's a decent fight for Lawrence. So, yeah, I was willing to jump in around 60%.
Yeah. You say moderately inexperienced. I would argue that neither are level, really.
Maybe that was too nice.
Yeah. It's funny. I actually played Lawrence against Jose Johnson on Contenders. And by the way, if you ever want to know if there's an edge in MMA, Ronnie Lawrence is plus 200 against Jose Johnson on Contender Series. But yeah, I don't really. I think I agree with most of your analysis, Luke. Like my issue is, like, I think Lawrence is going to get Cachero down a fair bit here. I think if it goes 15, you probably see 5 to 6 takedowns in that neighborhood. The issue I have on the other side, and the reason I'm not playing him, one, I think Lawrence's cardio can be a bit suspect at times. And two, it's just like, will he do enough standing to win the fight? Because I don't really love his control grappling, to be honest. And so I kind of think it's fairly likely Cachero is going to pop up over and over. And it's like, I don't really know. Like, my gut is no, because I don't think Cachero has the kind of pop to offset the takedown volume, to be honest. But I don't know. I just don't really feel passionately about it. I don't feel like I have a great read on either guy. So, like, I kind of like lean with you guys, but nothing for me here again. Low volume.
Right. Real quick, not to mention, Ronnie Lawrence is also now at Sanford MMA too. So, yeah,
that's interesting. We'll see if it does anything for him. But I think he's but next up, we have another shit show here. We got William Knight versus Alonzo Menefield. Shockingly, I have like a pretty strong opinion here, but no bet. Nor do I really plan on making a bet. But like, I think Menefield is pretty clearly the side, to be honest. Like, I know everybody wants to fade Menefield. I did fade Menefield against Devin Clark. I'm not a huge fan of his, but guys, like, William Knight, like, just basically clinch fucked Alexa Kamer for 15 minutes. Like, he hasn't shown us anything. In the Contender Series, he got put on the mat and mounted immediately and literally only got out of the position when Cody Brundage panicked when the referee threatened to get him out of back mount. Like, I don't think Knight's very good. I think he's super hittable standing. The only thing he really does is hit hard, and I guess he's kind of heavy in the clinch. But, I think Menefield's pretty much the better fighter everywhere. The concern for me, and the reason I'm not playing Menefield, is at the end of the day, if you told me Menefield were just going to stand a distance and strike, I'd be all over him, because I actually don't think Knight can out-grapple him. We talked about it before. We all lost money on Menefield against Oven St. Preux. But, we saw Devin Clark, who was an All-American wrestler, try to wrestle Alonzo Menefield and failed pretty miserably. Like, Devin Clark's a much better wrestler than William Knight. I don't think Knight's going to be able to really have much grappling success if Menefield decides he wants to keep standing. The problem for me at the end of the day is Menefield's going to dive into the clinch like he always does. And if he's in the clinch, I don't really know what's going to happen. Like, Clark outworked him there, but Clark's, I don't want to say high level, but he's a top 20 light heavyweight. And William Knight is not. But that is the one place where I think Knight can have success. And since I have no sample showing me Menefield is willing to sit back a distance and strike, I can't really put money on him. But I do think he's the clear side, and I actually think an interesting spot here is Menefield by decision for one. That is currently plus 610, and I think that's pretty in play. Andrew just mentioned, I'm sorry I'm droning on about a fight I have no bet on. But the truth is, like, everybody's assuming, like Andrew said, William Knight, cardio king. Like, why do we think that? Because he landed a couple clinch takedowns against Alexa Kamer? Like, I don't think he's any kind of output king, nor do I think he's really going to be winning, like, the underhook battle. So, I don't know. I think it's an interesting spot. I do think if you're going to bet it, you're probably going to feel horrible about it if you lose, and bad about it if you win. So, anyway, that's my take. Like, what do you got?
I'm fine with you rambling, because I actually don't have a bet here either. I don't think there's really a clear side, to be honest. I don't have a super strong read here. I think the over 1.5, I know a lot of people are on that. I know it's super juiced now. I think minus 160, 65. That's not bad, because I think the heavy clinch fest is in play, but I no strong opinion on how this is going to play out.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, not a strong opinion on either guy, but what I will say definitively is I'm not a William Knight guy. I actually had a bet on Kamer over him in the last matchup, and if I'm being completely honest, I thought that win was more so. I can't take anything away from Knight in the W, but I think that win was also more predicated on Kamer fighting like a dumbass and engaging in the clinch battle with a much stronger, bigger guy. And because of that, he was ultimately then ended up getting tripped multiple times and taken down and controlled on the ground, which historically, isn't the main game of William Knight, where Kamer had a clear edge, in my opinion, just in the range striking. And even in what we saw in that fight was winning the range striking exchanges. So that was more so just a fight IQ thing there that, kind of pissed me off. But so I guess getting to this fight, I guess I'm kind of with you, John, that I think it's probably a decent spot for Menefield, because to me, it just comes down to like how Menefield approaches the fight. Like, because if you go back and watch him fight OSP, that was probably the most hesitant we've really ever seen him fight. Whatever reason that was, obviously he ended up getting KO'd, so that makes more sense, like hindsight, but just in the aggregate, we haven't seen him fight like that. So I'm curious to see how he approaches this fight. Like, is he going to be more passive because he got knocked out in the last fight? Or does he say, I was more passive in the last fight and I got knocked out as a result, so I'm going to come forward and blitz forward more and do what got me to the dance? And if that's the case, I think actually Menefield's probably pretty live for a traditional Menefield KO, because I think Knight, despite a strong build, I don't think he's actually the most athletic guy. I don't think he's the fastest guy. I think his defense is pretty bad. He's not high output. So that's what makes this fight, I think, a bit of a dumpster fire from a betting perspective, because I think really the crux of it to me comes down to how Menefield approaches the fight. And I don't definitively know. I think Menefield could smoke him in a round. We could see a range staring contest, or conversely, we could see just a ton of clinch battle on the cage, because we have seen at least a couple fights from both guys where that has been the case, at least one for Menefield and a couple more for Knight. But what I will say, even in terms of Knight, like if you go back even pre-Contender Series, when he fought this dude named Rocky Edwards, who is 12-9-1, who's a jiu-jitsu guy, just, regional journeyman, didn't really look good, was taken down by that guy and even put in some compromise. Like I think it was the second round, the Rocky Edwards dude had his back, and Knight just literally held onto his arm, just 2-on-1 for 4 minutes. I'm not kidding. He held onto his arm for 4 minutes, didn't do anything, didn't try to get up. So I don't know, man. I don't really understand the William Knight love in general. He has to prove more to me. Even Brundage in the Contender Series fight had success before, Travis Brown like elbows. So it's a spot where I think Menefield could look just like a crazy big favorite, but because I don't know how he's going to approach the fight, I can't really bet it in good conscience. But I think an interesting spot is the fight starts round 2 at -180. It's going to be a sweaty first round if we go, crazy Menefield in the first round, because like I said, I think that knockout is potentially live if that's how he decides to approach it. But I think there is some data points to suggest that this fight could go extended. So I think -180 fight starts round 2 could be a sneaky decent play.
Yeah, I kind of like that, Luke, to be honest with you. We move on. I do have a bet here, the first of 2 so far. We got Alexis Davis, Sabina Mazo. I have a unit and a half on old lady Alexis at a +1 or +200. I guess my thinking here is, both Luke and I bet Justine Kish against Sabina Mazo back in, I think it was over the summer. That was fun times. But I don't hate Sabina Mazo. I kind of like what she brings to the table. It's a lot of volume, and obviously her kicking game is pretty next level. She's also got a pretty good clinch game. But that's really all she has. When you see girls go forward against her, she doesn't really know how to circle out. She backs straight up. Her defense tends to break down right away. And when she can't just fire head kicks or leg kicks, she doesn't really have much boxing. She'll fling a jab out there, but it's not really – there's no real stopping power behind it to kind of break pressure. I think you saw that in both the Aldrich fight and the Kish fight. Both times, or any time either of them would go forward, they'd have massive success in the pocket. And then for whatever reason, they'd get back out and start playing the outside game, and she'd start kicking the crap out of them again. Davis doesn't do that. Alexis Davis, she's old. She might be unraveling a bit at this point, and there's always a concern with the facial optics since her face turns into a tomato after 2 or 3 strikes. But she is extremely reliable for 15 minutes to go forward, stay in your face, and in boxing range. I mean, if you look at her last fight, she fought Viviane Araujo, Jennifer Maia, and Katlyn Chookagian, and she outlanded all 3 of them. And, that is a substantially higher level of competition than Sabina Mazo is fighting. And Chook, by the way, is the kind of girl who has the tools to stick and move for 15 minutes away from that pressure. And she still outlanded her. But Chook does actually have the tools to, get away from that kind of pressure. Whereas Mazo, she backs up straight to the fence. And, unless she's added new tools, I kind of think Davis is going to find the pocket pretty frequently and going to be the one having the most success there. And even, that clinch, which is what Mazo's traditionally used when people have close distance, Davis is pretty good in the clinch as well. And then you add to that, even when it's in space, obviously Mazo could head kick her and finish her. She tends to be hittable. But Davis is happy to catch kicks. And I think if she ends up on top of Mazo, it's probably a round, to be honest. If you want to say it should be evens or Mazo should be a slight favorite because Davis is really old and Mazo's a young prospect who's shown pretty good athleticism, okay, I get that. If this fight was 2 years ago, I think I'd have Mazo minus 150. Davis minus 150. Either way, I think the absolute worst you could say is Mazo's just over a coin flip here. I think Davis poses a ton of stylistic issues, and she's going to capitalize pretty much on exactly where Aldrich and Kish had success. Blags, how about you?
I'm going to pass here. I'm going to pass it over to Luke.
Luke.
Yeah, so I had jumped in on a personal play. I just threw a half unit on Davis by decision at plus 300. In full transparency, I am not a Sabina Mazo guy. I am now 0 for 2 betting against Sabina Mazo. I played JJ Aldrich against her at UFC 246. In my opinion, my money aside, now watching that fight back probably, I think, for the 3rd time now, I still think JJ Aldrich won that fight. And I guess little fun fact, our good old favorite judge of MMA, Adelaide Bird, was one of the judges that scored that fight 29-28 for Sabina Mazo. So just throwing that out there a little bit. Played her, Justine Kish plus 240 against her. Kish was up 2 rounds on 2 judges' scorecards going into the 3rd. Clearly losing the 3rd. I don't concede that in any stretch of the imagination. But at the end of the day, gets caught with roughly a minute and a half left in the fight and gets submitted. So honestly, my betting angles against Sabina Mazo have not been bad. In my opinion, it's just I've kind of chalked it up to variance. And that's not to say that I don't think Mazo is a decent prospect. She's still a young girl, has some upside. King's MMA, Rafael Cordero, talk about all that. But John, you touched on a lot of good points that I just don't think she does well with boxing-based pressure, which is something that Alexis Davis does bring. So yeah, I was willing to, throw that half unit flyer on the plus 300. I guess my more so concern is just the optics potentially in this fight, as you touched on, Sabina Mazo, or I'm sorry, Alexis Davis kind of turns into Sloth from the Goonies, after a round or two, which doesn't look great, but she is going to go forward. But the issue is, I guess she's hittable. Mazo's output is, unreal statistically, even though it's over a relatively small sample size, but still she throws a ton. So I understand why Mazo is the favorite. I capped her the favorite myself, but definitely not where I think it is, because I think you brought up a good point too, John, where I think a caught kick from Alexis Davis could steal around too. I mean, Davis is a black belt, Mazo brown belt, but I still think Mazo also would probably be willing to just engage in terms of playing, quote unquote BJJ off her back. So I think that's a way that Davis can win rounds too. It just really comes down. It's like kind of a bet I classify all the time that I'm willing to lose. Yeah. It's just a fight that or a line that I think is relatively off. And I guess I'm kind of willing to, throw throw the money against Meso one more time, because like I said, I don't think my reads have been off against her. I think she, like I said, I think she struggles with pressure, and that's something Davis is going to bring. You're giving me a decent sized plus number on a girl who hasn't finished a lot of fights in Davis, who's still going to be high output, has decent boxing. I guess I'm willing to go back to the bandwagon. So we'll see what happens.
So real quick, so we were talking about her. You were talking about her output, and it is insane. It's kind of weird how it breaks out, though, and it always seems to come when she's way behind. What's the stat you gave me yesterday when we were chatting about that fight, about her the way she's been judged? Mazo.
I don't have it off the top of my head, but let me see if I can remember. I think she has lost the first 2 rounds on at least one judge's scorecard in 4 of her 5 UFC fights. Hypothetically, should be 2, assuming you score the Aldridge fight correctly. So realistically, she's lost the first 2 rounds in 4 of her 5 UFC fights.
Yeah, and that's
outside of Shayna Dobson. Shayna Dobson is the only anomaly. Just saying.
But that's what I'm saying, though, because it's like her output thing is kind of weird, because both Aldrich and Kish, like Kish started just letting her kick her in the face the whole last round. Like it happened like 5 times. 5 times.
Like, come on, Jesse, get those hands up, girl. Come on now.
Like it's like she has magic powers that make people just avoid the pocket in the last round. But yeah, I like Davis. We move on, Legs. Let's start with you. We got the Brazilian cowboy taking on Ramazan Magomedov. Any thoughts here?
Not really. I haven't really looked at the new replacement here, to be honest with you. I didn't. I backed the what was it? The under 2.5 in the Shavkat Oliveira fight. I don't think Oliveira really looked too hot in that fight. I don't really know. It just didn't look like he wanted to be there. I know Quinn brought that up before too. I don't really. I don't know. I'm really low on Oliveira just in general. So I don't know. Just a pass overall.
Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of love for the Russian, and I definitely get it. I think he opened, or I think Oliveira opened -150. That flipped. Ramazan went to -150, and then now we're back down to pick'em. So I think that just kind of shows the potential volatility of the matchup. I think from a stylistic perspective, Ramazan has a good style to beat a guy like Oliveira, but it's one of these fights where he's getting a very gigantic step up in competition. Statistically, Oliveira defense takedowns at 63%. It's more so that kind of grind, tight pace that some guys put on him that breaks him, which is something that Ramazan could bring here. I concede that. But the question you have to ask yourself is, how does that translate to a guy who's been perennial top 25 and fighting, even fringe top 15 guys, being competitive there? And I think an interesting component of the fight too is obviously Ramazan, Dagestani guy, wrestler, but he's pretty decent on the feet. He throws a decent amount of output, throws a ton of kicks, decent jab, can fight from both stances. But I think an interesting consideration in this fight is the only guy that Alex Oliveira has ever been outlanded by, considering the strength of competition, has been Mike Perry, and the differential in strikes there was only 18. Yeah. So I think that's pretty interesting here. If I guess the narrative out throw the wrestling out the window for 2 seconds, if he's going to come out here and just put a pace on Cowboy Oliveira, I don't know if that's really a good take, because there's a lot of data out there to suggest that guys can't put a pace on Cowboy Oliveira, who are much better, much more battle tested, much more proven than this Ramazan guy. And I'll wrap it up real quick. I think with the amount of kicks that Ramazan throws, Oliveira throws heat, man. He throws heat with those right hands down the pocket. I think being a wily vet, I think he might be able to pick up on some movement patterns of Ramazan and be able to land counter shots effectively. The question really just comes down to, can Oliveira just not get grinded out? So I'm actually going to go with the vet. I think it might be a decent vet lesson spot where people are a little too high on the Russian, but I definitely understand why people are high on the Russian, because he does have a path here. It's just whether it translates to the level. So it's a fight I'm 100% fine with passing on. I think it's a fight where a lot of people are going to plant their flag on. Want to say, Vetless inside, good style for Ramazan to beat Oliveira. I want no part of it personally, but I'm going with the Vetless and Cowboy.
Yeah, so I agree with almost everything you said. And real quick, I don't want to put my tinfoil cap on. I know people talk about Oliveira looking horrible against Shavkat Rakhmonov. All I'm going to say is that might have been a work. That's it. I'm not down the rabbit hole here, but
he's got to feed his kids.
But anyway, yeah, I mean, Luke, I think you nailed it. Like, Oliveira has at his worst been like a top 25 gatekeeper at 170, top 20, top 25. He's fought pretty much nothing but top 20 guys forever. And like, I guess like you said, stylistically, there are things in particular in the grappling that maybe Ramazan could do to exploit him. But it's like the step up, it's not just a step up in that Oliveira's been fighting better competition, just in athleticism. Like, I like Jordan Williams, but Jordan Williams is not even close to the level of athlete or close to the level of strength of like an Oliveira. And so like you can look great, and I don't think he looks great as a grappler. I think he looks like a good grappler. But you can look like a good grappler regionally and then struggle when you start fighting like men in the UFC who are like beast athletes like Oliveira is. Like, for however flaky he is, he's one of the more explosive fighters at 170 pounds. He can have his issues. He can be broken. The Dalby fight wasn't a great look, even though the referee might have cost him that fight. The Rakhmonov fight wasn't a great look. But at the end of the day, it's just weird for this to be even. It's like, I don't have much interest, like kind of like what Luke said, in laying favorite money with Cowboy. But if he gets back out that plus 125, plus 150 spot, I will. And like Oliveira or Rakhmonov could just go and not Rakhmonov, Kurmagomedov could just go and out volume him here. That could happen, but I think there's a huge difference here between like him being the better technical striker, and then for the first time in his career, seeing a guy with actual UFC speed and power. And like, it's one of those things. We saw this. I mentioned it before the Alves-Lazzez fight. It's just like, look, it's very easy to look good when the competition you're fighting isn't great. Even if you are good, the first time you see that step up to a guy that's got that kind of athleticism you haven't seen before, it's tough to deal with. And I kind of think that's a case here. I think Cowboy should be a slight favorite, to be honest. Possibly even hindsight will look like a big favorite, but I think slight favorite's fair. Kurmagomedov does look like a good prospect, but yeah, it's a pass at the moment. But if it goes to like decent dog money, I'm going to play Oliveira. We move on. We got Alexander the Great Hernandez taking on Thiago Moises. Luke, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no super strong opinion. I guess I'm kind of giving a potential credence play to Hernandez if he gets back around like minus 150, 60%. But at current price, I kind of think it's right around where it should be. What I will say, even in his last fight against Gritzmacher, like obviously it's Chris Gritzmacher, say that for what you will, but I do think from like a technical perspective, if you actually go back and watch all of his fights and then you watch the fight with Gritzmacher, I think there were some clear evolutions in his game. Like he seemed, we were talking about it too, John, like in terms of like a game plan, it seemed a bit more composed. Like he seemed, I guess the best way to describe it, he seemed more in the moment. I guess like he just seemed more in tune with everything he was doing and what he was throwing. It seemed like there was a bit more process, and that might just be credence to, Factory X, whatnot. But in terms of a stylistic perspective, Moises isn't high output. Hernandez has higher output, has shown more aggressive tendencies. Throw the Trinaldo fight out the window. There's just nothing you can take away from that. That was just a weird fight in general. So I think Hernandez has minute-winning ability in this fight. But conversely, the issue I always had with Hernandez is defensive issues. We did see Bobby Green, outpace Moises statistically, almost doubled him up on strikes. Still took an L. We can talk about how that, decision was or not. But at the end, at the end of the day, Moises landed a ton of clean strikes, and that was ultimately what swayed all three judges. So that, I guess, is what kind of gives me more pause to Hernandez here. And then I do think Hernandez has some wrestling, grappling, and grinding upside here. I know Moises high-level black belt, but he has been grinded before. Granted, that was largely mostly against Beneil Dariush, who's also solid wrestler, high level black belt. So take that for what you will. But I think Hernandez can even just play the blanket game to get some clinch control, just kind of stay on him, because I don't necessarily think if it's just like a range striking exchange, I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest game plan from Hernandez, because that just might give Moises a little bit more credence. It seems to be a lot of people on Moises, haven't seen a ton of people on Hernandez. Not a fight, like I said, I'm passionate about, but if Hernandez gets to -160, I'm willing to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, I like Hernandez a good bit. I'm not eager to play him with the current number, kind of to your point. I'd prefer like 150, 60 as well. But I think he's got Moises covered pretty much everywhere here. And I traditionally have not been a huge Hernandez guy. But like, so even looking back, I get Moises just beat Michael Johnson and Bobby Green. But like, Michael Johnson was the meme of all memes. And the Bobby Green fight, like, even if you say it wasn't a bad decision, like Green closed -300 there, and Moises won that fight by like the thinnest of margins. It's pretty much what a +300 winning a fight looks like. Like it felt like he was a big dog. You know, he still had the same issues with output we've always seen him have. He only really got the grappling going after Bobby initiated it himself. And so like I look here and it's like, you know, look, Hernandez, can he strike on the same level of like a Drew Dober or a Cowboy Cerrone? No. Do you need to strike even close to that level to outstrike, you know, Thiago Moises? Not really. I don't know. I guess Moises could land takedowns, but Hernandez seems like a reasonable defensive grappler. He seems to be decent at scrambling. And I don't think you could really project Moises to land more than 1 to 2 takedowns here. And on the feet, like maybe Hernandez gasses, but the thing is, even if he slows down, Moises is so inactive. It's like Hernandez could literally be totally gassed out and win a round, just outlanding him like 12 strikes to 10. Like, I'm not even kidding. So I pretty much think he's better wherever it goes. Look, gas tank's a bit of a concern. Hernandez's general flakiness is a bit of a concern, but I don't know. I just think he's the far more talented athlete than Moises is. And Moises, even in his wins, outside the Holloway fight against pretty much a non-UFC fighter, really has never looked very good. That's my opinion anyway. Lags, how about you?
Yeah, I'm with both you guys here. I think this is similar. Luke brought up a good point with this in the Cowboy fight. This is definitely, I think, a fight where people are going to want to plant their flags on the either fuck the Alex Hernandez or, you know what, this is his chance. Thiago Moises sucks. His output's not great. Pretty much has to grapple him the entire fight to win, in my opinion. So I think that's kind of how it's going to play out. But yeah, I favor Hernandez here. And I just kind of think it's a trappy spot that just people are going to want to plant their flags on this type of fight.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not really, even if I end up playing Hernandez, planning to go big on him. It's not really the spot to do that. I just think he's kind of, you know, the better fighter. Like, if that's
my thing is, I think it's just like it's a good fight, like matchmaking wise, but I think it causes an awkward style of clash, like where I just don't know how the fight's going to play out. So that's kind of why I don't want to lay a huge number with Hernandez.
I guess my general question is, like, is there any spot, I mean, either of you guys, is there any real spot in this fight where you could see Moises have consistent success that's not basically caused by Hernandez either gassing or doing something stupid? Like, in terms of skill for skill, obviously he's the better jiu-jitsu practitioner, but this isn't a grappling match. So
honestly, I guess slight contrarian take though. I give more credence to Moises' striking than most people. I don't think his striking's bad. I think it's more so just an output issue, to be honest.
Yeah, but when he gets backed up, he doesn't throw punches. I mean, I
don't concede that. I'm just saying from like a technical perspective, I think he's fast. He throws in good combos. He just doesn't throw enough and struggles with pressure, like you said. But
yeah, that's fair. I mean, I don't disagree with you. It's just like, how many times do we have to see him basically just stop throwing punches when someone gets in his face before we say he's not a very good striker? You know, it's like at some point results have to matter. But anyway, we move on. We got Alex Caceres taking on Kevin Kroom. Lags, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I talked on it a little bit before we jumped on the pod here. I think Kroom might be like the big public dog here, and I'm not seeing all the love here, to be honest. I don't think his striking defense is too great. I think his wrestling's okay. His jiu-jitsu seems okay, but it's mostly just, solid for the regional level. I don't really think it's too great UFC. I don't think it translated that well, to be honest. I mean, even in the Roosevelt fight, he was able to, club and sub him. But Roosevelt's also a guy with under 10 fights, where we have Caceres here near 30 fight veteran. I don't think that something like that's going to happen. I think Caceres, like, this line is probably accurate. Obviously not interested in laying a huge chalky number in Caceres. I think the Kroom side might be the trap of the week.
Yeah. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, no strong opinion either. Keep it brief. I think it's a decent spot for Caceres. I mean, I guess I understand the Kroom money from a perspective that if he's going to come forward and he's just going to spam shit, and that if Caceres, I guess, gets stuck on the cage, potentially stuck on his back, where he just tries, play jiu-jitsu, isn't going to sweep, that Kroom can potentially just win minutes there. But from like a technical perspective, I kind of think Caceres has him covered, to be honest. I think his boxing's better from a pure technique wise. I think his defense is better. Kroom's defense sucks. He kind of just comes in, and you touch on that legs. He kind of just spams shit from striking and grappling. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So yeah, I mean, am I trying to lay like, minus 220 on Alex Caceres? No, it honestly might be another one of these kind of, plant your flag type of fights where people are looking to find spots. And they're saying, all right, well, Kroom, we can, sit there and look at a couple Alex Caceres performances. Kroom might have some spammy upside, in a decision win. I concede that, but honestly, I think it is kind of a levels fight, to be honest. Like I think Alex Caceres just is the better fighter, but at the same time, Alex Caceres is also a little fluky as well. But there have been a couple narratives historically where people have taken that angle against Alex Caceres, and he sticks a big middle finger in your face and says, not so much to Kimbe Mutombo. No, I'm gonna put the vet lesson on. So I think a sneaky play for the fight is the fight ends in sub at like plus 260. I think there's going to be a decent amount of grappling in the fight. I think both guys, have shown some submission upside, at least more so from Kroom regionally, not so much Caceres historically, but did sub Springer in his last spot. I think we might get some interesting exchanges, transitions. I think both guys have some defensive irresponsibility, some upside there. So I think plus 260 could be an interesting poke on a prop for this fight for ends and sub.
Yeah, I mean, no play. I might take a look at some props as well. Like, that sounds interesting, but I think Caceres is going to dumpster Kroom, to be honest. I don't really. Everybody, he seems to be like the dog of the week, and I just don't. Yeah. Like, we talked about it before we went live, but Lags and I were both talking about how it's not something that really interests us. And it's like, there are guys like, Kroom has a ton of subs on his record, and it's like we kind of went through this with Chase Hooper already with Caceres when we're like, oh, you can grapple and sub guys, he's going to sub Alex Caceres. But like, I feel like regionally, especially like on the lower level regionally, just being very aggressive at the grappling and going for a lot of attempts is going to get you a lot of submissions. And that kind of just like reckless grappling doesn't really work, up at this level. If guys have just, reasonable submission defense, like Gugabe just pointed out in the chat, but like Kroom pretty much is the same level as Springer, who a lot of people are like, oh, Springer sub Giga, a guy who'd been training grappling for like a year and a half. Like, oh, he's going to definitely give Caceres issues. I just don't see it. Like, maybe he can just track him down and outwork him, like, just with pure aggression. But look, Kroom was plus 450 against Roosevelt Roberts for a reason. It's not if he loses that fight, what's the line here? About the same, probably, maybe plus 400. Instead, now he's plus 170, and people are jumping in. I don't know. I don't get it. Caceres is going to have him completely outclassed on the feet. Kroom win is predicated either on a submission or him just landing a bunch of takedowns and outworking him. But I don't think he's a great wrestler. And while Caceres might not be able to like keep space against UFC level, grapplers, this isn't really that. I don't think he's going to have much of an issue. And if it does turn into, a scrambly fight, I kind of trust him to be the more positionally sound guy and find dominant spots. So yeah, I mean, submission's interesting. I don't really want to play the minus 210 with Caceres on the off chance he does do something stupid and get himself submitted. But it seems like it's one-way traffic on Kroom. Like, BetMMA is like 90% Kroom right now. If it
real quick, John, do you guys think and legs. Do you guys think that like this could just be like the sneaky, most evident play of the card? Like we say, we don't want to lay minus 200 on Alex Caceres, but he comes out there and just rolls Kroom. And it's a levels fight because we're scared of, laying the chalk on Caceres. But yeah, you bring up a lot of good points that it could just be a levels. Like, I just think it's interesting that there's some of these fights where like, we're just so like, potentially anti-lay chalk on this guy, but they get that kind of, quote unquote step down. And we're like, even the Springer fight, that was kind of the same narrative too. We're like, we don't want to lay the chalk on Caceres, but hindsight 2020, we're like, what the fuck? He was like minus 400. So
it's like, I haven't heard an argument that's not made. It's Alex Caceres for Austin Springer, for Kevin Kroom yet. Like that's really it. Like that, I have yet to hear somebody make any kind of actual technical stats-based anything argument for how Kroom wins this fight other than Alex Caceres shouldn't be minus 200 and this guy grapples. So, yeah, I don't totally disagree with you. I kind of hope it gets pushed down to minus 185 because I would jump in there. So, we'll see. But we move on. We got Angela Hill, Ashley Yoder. You want to start here?
You said me? Yeah, me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I thought you said legs. No, I guess I'll start off the top by saying in a WMMA pitter-patter fight that Angela Hill minus 360 is probably wide. But at the end of the day, I largely think Ashley Yoder's win condition is solely predicated on her getting 3 to 4 minutes of top position in at least 2 rounds, which historically just has not been something that she can do outside of Miranda Granger. You can go back to the first fight. Yes, Yoder had some success in that in terms of the grappling, but also going back to that same fight as well, she also lost position. Angela Hill got some top time, was able to also get back up and out volume her as well. I believe that was actually the second round. But at the end of the day, that fight was scored a 30-27, in which I think Yoder had some upside and essentially blew it. And that's ultimately the issue I have with Yoder is that she's not overtly high output. And she actually, I would just say she's low output in general. And she's willing to accept the back foot, which are 2 things that I, from a betting perspective, just do not like in WMMA when it comes to backing fighters. So I think it's pretty clear to say that Angela Hill has, the striking edge on the feet. She puts on a decent pace. And I largely just think Angela Hill, wins another decision. I was originally looking to potentially target Angela Hill by decision, but that's gotten bet up a decent amount. I still think it might have some value based on the line discrepancy, but I still don't. I should say the line discrepancy between her decision line and her money line, because I still don't think a finish from her is really high percentage at all. So I think that's probably the play for the fight, but I mean, there have been a couple points. I mean, you go to the Gedalia fight, she got controlled in the first round. Michelle Watterson, controlled her in the third round. But what I will say in regards to the Watterson fight, Watterson went 0 for 9 on takedowns prior to getting that one in the third. Gedalia only went 1 for 4. Both girls are better wrestlers, in my opinion. And I also think from the first fight that Angela Hill's takedown defense has also leveled up since then. So I think if you're taking kind of more the flyer, close WMMA pitter-patter narrative on Yoder, I don't hate it. But what I will say, I just think you're relying on Yoder she needs to get, 3 to 4 plus minutes of top time in 2 rounds, which is just a tough ask in this fight. So I think you can potentially, justify saying the Hill line is wide. I personally think it is as well, but also just trying to establish what the win condition of Yoder is, because I just don't think she can keep up on volume.
Yeah, it's weird. Like what is it right now? Plus 290 on Yoder? Is that where we are?
I think it's higher than that.
300 on dimes now. Yeah, it's just I'm trying to I think the line is wide, I'll be honest, but it's like the question is how wide, and I'm trying to think of the best way to describe Yoder. The thing is, Yoder can't win this fight on the feet. I legitimately think she pretty much can't win this fight over 3 rounds on the feet. She has the size and reach advantage, but she doesn't use it. Yeah, and she has no pop and she's low volume, whereas Hill, she might not have the most power ever, but she's pretty physical, and she is going to bite down on the mouthpiece and go forward and throw a lot. We saw it the first time they fought. She basically lit her up at range, and I'd expect that to happen again here. I think it's wide just because, Yoder landed 3 takedowns in the first fight, and while I agree, Luke, her defense or takedown defense has gotten better, Hills, I think it's very well in play that Yoder could land 2 to 3 takedowns again. And it's just like in these kind of fights, the margins, if you land 2 to 3 takedowns for a close fight, especially when neither party has a ton of finishing upside, are so close. So it's like, let's say instead of Yoder landing a takedown early in the round, she gets lit up by Hill for 2.5, 3 minutes, and then lands a takedown at the end of the round, holds out for 2 minutes. That probably shouldn't win a round, but we know what judging's like in 2021. We know they prioritize the end of the round. And so it's so I guess what I'm getting at is I think there's value on Yoder a little bit, but I don't really want to play her because her win condition and the margins for her to get there are so narrow and just kind of require, basically perfect round sequencing, or for her to have shown a step up that, she fought 2 months ago and didn't show then. So basically, yeah, I think Hill's the pick. Maybe she's not 75%, but maybe she's 70% around there. I don't know. I'm not very interested in Yoder, though. Flags, how about you?
I'll leave it short and sweet. I think a Yoder decision win looks pretty much similar to a Thiago Moises decision win over Bobby Green. I think that's the kind of slim margins we're talking about. And that's about it. I think the Angela Hill decision line at -160, 170, probably pretty accurate and isn't too bad if you're looking to play. But obviously, you feel like it's a dumbass. Yeah. I was a FanDuel. I think it's -175.
Okay. It was around -150, which is really what I wanted.
That's not bad. Yeah.
Dimes if you guys can play dimes, but they have that other skin. But yeah, it's not.
What's it at, John? On there?
Bet any sports -165. Not great.
Let me check on FanDuel again. Yeah, it's 75.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna kick myself for 20 cents if I don't play it, because I just feel like my read on the fight's so solid.
Or you'll play it, and then Andrew Hill will somehow end up in top position like she did against Hernandez. Sure, with elbows. I was on her decision.
Elbows.
I could not. I literally was like, God, this was the easiest cash of my life. And then suddenly she's in mount throwing elbows down at his side first. Just what the fuck just happened?
Good times.
Anyway, we move on. Now, this is a fun fight, boys. We got Pedro Munoz taking on Jimmy Rivera. I don't have a bet here. I guess my opinion on the fight is I did have a bet when it was originally booked, and it was decision +150 for Rivera. Now that it's +100, I don't. I think Rivera is he's the side in that the line is right. I personally capped him 60, 65%. He's obviously the better striker from a technique perspective. Munoz probably can't grapple him at all. I don't give Munoz almost any chance to take him down, even if he were to get, let's say, 1 takedown, which is probably in the upper 10% of what his upside is here. I don't think he can hold him there. I'm pretty certain he can't hold him there. But the reason, I can't lay it with Rivera at 150 is it's just Rivera's not really a big hitter. And Munoz is going to come forward through that damage. And the one thing that kind of concerns me a bit is, for as good a striker as Rivera is, the thing that threw Munoz off with that Sterling fight is just Sterling's lateral movement. The guy is never in one place. He's hitting and he's escaping on an angle, whereas Munoz will plant or he'll back up. And, or not Munoz, Rivera, I'm sorry. But if he does that here, Munoz will just get in his face. And so, I think Rivera is going to win the fight, and I think he wins it at a decent clip. But I think it's going to be reason to be close, if that makes sense. Plus, the one thing I kind of can't get out of my mind is just Rivera's defense pretty much completely breaking down on the fence in the on fight multiple times. We've seen that other times in his career as well. And so it just kind of scares me that this could be a fight where, Rivera is clearly landing the better strikes for 4 minutes. Munoz gets in there, maybe not even drops him by down, but lands 1 or 2 big shots, and that swings around. So, yeah, I think the line is right. I don't have much interest in betting it. Lags, how about you?
Yeah, similar thoughts here, John. I think, again, this is one of those fights where people are trying to play flags. And I think it's you know what? Rivera is obviously the better striker, better fighter outside of a finish, probably wins this fight. Plant the flag. And then optically, Munoz is able to steal 2 rounds, he wins the decision, and then you feel like a dumbass because you laid -150 on what you think is the first fight and not a lot of finishing upside from Jimmy. So ultimately, that's why I'm staying off. But I think the Jimmy decision line at plus money, if you like Jimmy, is the side to play.
Yeah, I agree. Luke, how about you?
I think Lags just kind of touched it up right at the end for me. Pretty much what my sentiment is. Originally going into this, I thought I'd be playing Rivera pre-tape, and after looking into it, it's like, honestly, I just kind of think the line's right around where it should be, if not it being a little wide, just based on optics. Like I said, I think Rivera is probably the better striker here. But optics are a real thing in MMA, even though he's getting, tagged. Dude's durable, going to come forward, throw shots. How did the judges score that? Rivera, historically a decision machine, not a lot of finishing upside. So you're largely banking on him outworking Pedro, which I think is in play, the most likely outcome of the fight. But is he outworking Pedro, enough to get a decision? I think so, but I'm not confident enough to, lay -150 on it. I don't like the price. So yeah, I think if you are to play it, Jimmy decision's probably the way to play it, but I still don't think at evens that really holds a ton of value either. I think it's just a good fight to pass on overall.
Yeah, agreed. Kind of like what I said before we got on. It's just like, even if you favor Jimmy, it's like you have to give him like a 10 to 15% chance to finish just on it's a striking fight. Munoz is hittable. And so at that point, it's like, unless you're putting Jimmy at like 70, 75%, which I think is tough, it's like the decision line's probably right, to be honest.
He did clip Pedro in the first fight, though, wobbled him a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, didn't drop him, but,
Pedro's a zombie, though, man. Like,
I know.
really, like,
I'm just throwing some other minutia in there.
Like the shots that he ate from Cody Garbrandt were not real life. So we move on. We got the people's main event. Just kidding. We got Montana De La Rosa taking on Myron Bueno Silva. Legs, what do you got here? Featured battle.
Yeah, featured people's main event. Yeah, I like Montana De La Rosa here in this spot. But I'm actually targeting a prop here. So I have a unit on her by decision at plus 195. Yeah, I think she's going to be able to compete in the striking. I think that while Silva does hit harder, I think De La Rosa is a more technical striker. But I think this fight largely plays out to how often and how aggressive Montana is with her wrestling, because I think that the wrestling is the clear path to victory here. Get the control time and win herself a unanimous decision. And that's kind of where I see this fight playing out. I think that the gas tank isn't that great. I think that she has takedown issues, and I think that Montana on top isn't going to get armbarred. So I think Montana by decision is a solid play near 2-1.
Luke, come here.
Yep, I'm on it as well. Montana De La Rosa by decision. If you guys have been listening to this podcast for a while, you know I am not a huge proponent of Montana De La Rosa's game in general, just because I don't think her optics are great. But in terms of this fight, I think she has a pretty clear path on the path to victory on the ground here. Silva, it's easy to get in on her hips. I think body lock takedowns are pretty live. Silva throws a lot of kicks as well, so I think caught kick takedowns are live as well. And I don't want to, quote unquote wiki cap it, but like how many girls is Marina Moroz, out wrestling and getting significant top time on? So with that being said, I think Montana has better wrestling than Marina Moroz. So I think she's, assuming she takes the correct game plan, is able to shoot takedowns, I think she's going to get them here. I think she's going to be able to get enough top time. In terms of the feet, I concede the fact that if this fight is, standing for 12 and a half minutes, probably going to eat my bet, because even if Montana, is active, like she went strike for strike with Araujo, still lost clearly on optics and got 30-27 in that fight. So I kind of feel the same way here, that if I'm wrong in my read and Montana's not able to have any sort of wrestling or grappling success, I'm probably going to eat my bet, because even if she's, up on volume numbers, she's probably going to lose the optics. She gets bladed up in a lot of her fights too, doesn't move her head a ton. But I'm pretty confident in saying that I think Montana is going to get top time, and I'm pretty confident also in saying I don't think she gets subbed from Silva. I really, really don't. And conversely, I also don't think she submits Silva. Silva is a black belt. Montana has like 9 minutes of control time on Barella, a ton of back time, wasn't able to submit Barella, who can't really grapple at all either. So that's kind of more so my narrative on the decision play here is I think it's a competitive fight where Montana has a clear path to victory, and a girl in Silva I'm just not necessarily sold on. And just one other quick point, she was losing that fight to Jillian Robertson as well before she got that armbar. Can't take anything away from Silva in doing so. But I think it was more so on Jillian just making a small mistake. I think the path's clear for Montana to win this fight on the cards.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be on Montana as well. I haven't decided if I'm going to go with decision or money line, but I guess I actually just finished up taping this right before we went live. I guess my thinking is I think the common thought here is that there is a big edge for Silva standing, and I just don't really see that. Like, we've only really seen her have extended standing exchanges in one fight in the UFC, and it was the Moises fight. And in that fight, I get Silva throws hard. Moises dramatically outperformed her metrics from any other fight in the UFC. And it's not an accident. Like Silva, yeah, she comes forward, but it's like people are talking about her pressure like it's Gagey when he first got in the UFC. She's very slow, yet she throws a lot of big physical actions, but she's extremely hittable. Like this is not like Viviane Araujo, who was pressuring and is actually quick, has a jab that's going to snap out there and is not really easy to get away from. And De La Rosa actually had a fair bit of success against Viviane standing. She just obviously didn't have the power to kind of compete on minutes in that fight. And then let's just say Silva has a slight edge standing. Okay. In the grappling, like I get Silva's got a 76% defense, but takedown defense. That's also in part because Moises kept shooting. And by the way, Moises for her career, Luke, you said how many people has she out-grappled? She's an 18% takedown accuracy for her career and lands half a takedown a fight, and she landed 2 there. And actually what I thought was interesting, because like going into when I was taping, I was like, De La Rosa on top, like she doesn't have some heavy top game. Like maybe she could get armbarred. I actually don't really think Silva's guard is like that dangerous, which I know is kind of like a weird thing to say, but it's almost like when she's caught people in subs from bottom, like Jillian, it was in a transition. She got a little sloppy passing. Nadia Kassem is Nadia Kassem. Margot gets subbed from guard by everybody. Like,
Insta-tapped also.
Yeah. And I don't think Moises has any kind of formidable top game. All she really had to do was just shift her weight when Silva would start to turn. And I kind of think if you actually looked at Silva's takedown defense in that fight, Moises got in her hips basically every time she shot. She just didn't really have any idea how to finish a takedown. Yeah, that's exactly what will happen. Any idea how to finish a takedown. So, I kind of think, look, I'm not a huge Andrea Lee guy, but Andrea Lee has better takedown defense than Silva does, in my opinion. And
better get-ups.
And a way better get-up game. I kind of just think it's at worst an even fight standing. And De La Rosa, my one fear is she won't be aggressive enough for the takedowns. Like if she comes out like she did in the Lee fight and attempts 10, 12 takedowns here, I think she's going to win it pretty easily, to be honest. It's just really, will it be the Viviane fight where she waits till her leg is battered before she actually starts to wrestle? We'll see, but I think she's the side here. Anyway, we move on. Got a fun one. Stick with me. I have a bet here.
Yeah. Gather on the campfire.
The minor taking on Magomed Ankalaev, whatever. But anyway.
All right. Put some respect on him. Jesus. Come on, John. Ankalaev.
Okay. So the line on Ankalaev in the market's generally minus 340, minus 350. Here are the people that Magomed Ankalaev has fought in the UFC. Paul Craig, Marcin Prokhnio, Klidson Abreu, Dalchalu Gambula, and Ian Kutaba. Where do you think Krylov would be priced against those people? Probably minus 300 to 400 against all of them, right? I mean,
similar to Ankalaev.
Yeah, exactly. Like he went into the first. I think Luke mentioned it in the chat the other day. Ankalaev was minus 200 the first time it was booked with Coot, minus 300 the second time, and now he's minus 340 against Nikita Krylov. And now, look, don't get me wrong. I don't mind Ankalaev. Look, he, from a technical standpoint, he's almost technically perfect. Like, the guy's got incredibly fast hands. He's extremely difficult to hit. His counters are nasty, and he's a reasonably good grappler. I think where I kind of depart from everybody else when people talk about him being a future champion or top 5 now is, yes, he is technically excellent. Like, from a technical standpoint, like I said, top tier. The problem is he is so inactive, both standing and grappling, that the margins it requires for him to win rounds are razor thin. Like, what looks like a dominant round against, say, Klidson Abreu, with 1 or 2 hard shots there coming back the other way, might be a lost round, if you guys get what I'm saying. And so it's like, that fight, he got out-attempted by Klidson Abreu at range. He actually got out-attempted by Cutelaba at range last fight. Paul Craig was almost even with him on attempts at distance. He only outlanded him 20-12. Now, I'm not saying he's poor technically, but he leaves a lot of room for his opponents to stay in the fight. And now he's taken a big step up in class against a bigger guy who's also a way better athlete than anybody he's fought, who is, look, I worry about Krylov because he's so open when he gets into the pocket, and I worry he's just going to step in there to bang and get knocked out immediately. That could definitely happen, and, Ank's counters are sharp enough. But the bottom line is, if this fight extends, I think the minutes are going to be close, if not favor Krylov, just because he's going to be busy. And then in the grappling, I keep seeing people talk about Ank is clearly the better grappler, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. I know Krylov's been subbed a handful of times. He literally 2 fights ago lost a split decision with Glover Teixeira that he arguably won, where he spent more than half the fight in a control position with Teixeira. He literally swept Glover Teixeira and was pushing a grappling-heavy game plan against one of the division's best grapplers. Like, it's not – I get, again, that Krylov is reckless, that he is kill or be killed. He can get himself finished. I don't think he's a top 5 fighter, but he is a strong athlete, and he pushes – like I said to you guys the other day, he's like a homeless man's Colby Covington. He's going to come in there and he's going to force an insane pace. And bottom line is, I honestly think if he gets through the early portion of this fight, like without dying, it's going to be a very close fight, just basically on him forcing like a hellish pace. And we haven't really seen Ank be forced to kind of up his pace yet. And he may here. Who knows if he has the cardio to do it? We'll see. So, like, I kind of think you want to say Ank's 60%, like minus 150. I think that's fair. Minus 350, I think is crazy. So I have a unit on Krylov at plus 280. Lex, how about you?
Yep. So this is the second prop of my article this week, and it is actually targeting on Krylov dying in that early exchange. So I actually have a half unit on Magomed Ankalaev KO round 1 at plus 260. So just stat wise, Ankalaev 7 of 9 KOs have come in the first round. Krylov 25 of his 34 fights have ended in the first round, and 4 of his 6 losses have ended inside the first round. He comes up in all 4 of his UFC fights. He comes up hot, heavy, tries to put a pace and pressure on people, and it either works or it doesn't. Personally, I mean, obviously it's easy to say, but I pretty much think that Ankalaev is going to be able to probably keep this fight standing and is going to be able to piece him up as he's trying to enter here, and I think he's going to be able to be live for a first round knockout. But yeah, you have good points, John. I think that if this fight does get extended, I'm worried about the activity of Ankalaev on the feet. I'm worried about the cardio of both of these guys. And I think that what was interesting, I was looking at, I don't think Krylov has many third round finishes. So I think likely if this, I know a lot of people are on the over 1.5 here. I think that if it makes it out of the first round, I think you're probably safe, but I think it's going to be a big sweat in that first round.
Yeah, and real quick before we go to Luke, Yoda, Krylov's only 28. I hope you know that. Not an old guy. Luke, your turn.
Which is crazy because he looks like an old guy.
He's fought like 35 times. It's nuts.
Yeah, originally going into this, I thought I would be having like a massive bet on Ankalaev or using him as a parlay piece. And I'll preface off the top by saying, I like Ankalaev. I think the guy has a ton of upside in the division. Obviously, very well-rounded, powerful, accurate, fights from both stances, diversity of attack, has some wrestling upside. When he's been taken down, has been able to reverse position. I get all that. But you brought up kind of that stat that I referenced, not stat, but I guess odd stat that we referenced earlier, that he was, minus 200 against Cutelaba the first time, fluky decision that shoots him up, 6.5%, even just based on that, beats Cutelaba the second time. Now, like minus 340 against Krylov, not to, beat a dead horse, but is the biggest step up in competition that he's ever fought. And that's why I think it's interesting, because I'm not a huge Krylov guy either, but I also think he's a guy who doesn't get necessarily enough respect either for kind of the game he brings. And from like a stylistic perspective, the fight, I think he has a path. I think what Krylov needs to do is make it dirty, greasy, grindy, wear on him, maybe get some takedowns. If he doesn't, make it dirty in the clinch, because that's really not what, if you watch Ankalaev fights historically, that's not what proves credence to Ankalaev. He likes to play the range striking game. He needs kind of those perfect, largely type fights. And even people talk about, he has faced quote unquote grapplers. He's fought Paul Craig, Craig took him down, a couple times. And, we talk about, what's his name? Klitzen Abreu, guy's a black belt, but he busted his nose within 2 minutes. Dude was done after, his nose got broke. I just think, Krylov is a significant step up here. So as much as I like Ankalaev, I think it might be a questions answer type of fight where I think I don't hate any sort of stabs on Krylov, and I might even take it myself closer to fight day if these, Ankalaev parlay money keeps coming in, stuff keeps coming up, because there just has not been a guy who's even really attempted kind of the style that historically Krylov brings. And you touched on it too, John, especially referencing the Teixeira fight. How many guys have had that kind of grappling success, even in a loss against Glover Teixeira? Not too many out there. So I guess that's my thing is, obviously the guys, master of sport, combat sambo, all the Dagestani guys are, Dagestani Greco champion. I get that. But from what I've seen in MMA, I do think there are some potentially slight holes that Krylov could exploit. But to Lags' point, homeboy closes distance pretty poorly, and I really value the striking of Ankalaev. So if he nukes Krylov early, far from surprised. I guess I'm more so on the side that if this fight is extended, I think the people who are chucking Ankalaev in their parlays or, laying max bets on him at minus 340 might be questioning themselves a little bit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's
sure.
kind of when we were chatting yesterday, I was saying, I think Ankalaev KO fairly early is like a very high outcome, like 30, 35% in that neighborhood, maybe even higher than that. But I do think if it goes, like you said, to a decision, I actually think I favor Krylov kind of on activity in the decision. And now if Ank goes out there and beats him pillar to post for 15 minutes, I'll be ready to say, okay, all my kind of concerns with him are gone. But we'll see.
Yeah, cheap plug Patreon, guys. Value proposition article, Nikita Krylov decision plus 600. I think that's got some value personally.
So we move on. Luke, I'll stay with you. We got the main event. We got Cyril Gane. Is it Cyril Gane? Cyril Gane? Cyril Gane?
I think Cyril Gane.
Okay. Cyril Gane against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. What do you got?
So I think everybody kind of jumped on the over 1.5 at the early line. I think it opened like minus 130, minus 140. Props to you guys if you got on that early. I think that was probably a value in a pretty mispriced total, in my opinion, in this fight. At minus 200, I definitely wouldn't play it. I guess my angle more so is in a 5-minute fight at heavyweight. I think we're going to see a moderately slower paced first round, which at least in terms of a total, I think you're more so sweating that 2.5, aka Overeem Volkov. That was a tough hell to take on there.
Third straight event. This is the third straight event where people are getting – I'll let you go back to your saying in a second, where people are getting excited about an over 1.5 and a heavyweight main event. The last two, it didn't hit last week either.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't like the price now. I'm not going to lie. I would have played it, at the open, again at minus 140 personally.
I probably would have too.
But I guess my slight, I don't know if it's a contrarian angle necessarily, because I still favor Gane moderately significantly here. I think we see Gane shoot takedowns. I'm not saying he's going to, dive on legs for 15 minutes. There's, not a whole lot of data out there to suggest that he will do that. But I think it's a pretty clear path. You go back, through Rozenstruik's career, you even go back to the Kovalev fight, and Rizin may have made some improvements since then, but looked pretty shit in that fight and probably lost that fight go back to the first round of Albini. Albini was pretty much winning that first round. Albini doesn't, I think his technical wrestling acumen's pretty shit too. Had a lot of success there. Overeem even had some success. I think he had like 9 minutes of control time in that fight. But we were also talking about this in the chat too, John, where if this is a range kickboxing match for 25 minutes, is Surreal Gane, 75 plus %? Probably not, because obviously Rozenstruik 76-8 kickboxing record. Guy's got power. He's fast, explosive. Seen it before. I just don't really like the activity of Rozenstruik personally. I think Gane's he's heavyweight, but probably moves like a 205 middleweight. To be honest, you don't really see that too often. Activity high, cardio seems fine as well. So I think it's more so Rozenstruik being reliant on KO. So I think if you're going to play him, I think he's KO or bust, because I think he's going to really struggle to win minutes in this fight. But it's heavyweight. Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis last week, obviously completely different dynamic, but guys hit hard, man. So you can't necessarily analyze these heavyweight fights through the same lens as you would maybe some of the smaller weight classes. So maybe I'm not giving as much credence to Rozenstruik as I should. I've just historically been low on him. But we'll see. I think Gane will get takedowns, and I think he's live for a ground and pound finisher sub.
Yeah, so I have no play. I wouldn't say I feel strongly about it, but it's like, if you could tell me definitively how many takedowns Gane's going to shoot this fight, I could tell you whether or not I would bet the fight. Like, that's really kind of like the crux of like what's been fucking me up with capping this. 'Cause it's like, look, I do think Gane's a better kickboxer. Don't get me wrong. I actually think their offensive potency is similar. Gane probably a bit more output upside, but Rozenstruik clearly more power upside. But, the difference in defense is massive between the two, or has been today. PayPal My Money made a good point about Gane leading to the body. But, just generally, I think over an extended sample of minutes, like, I think I'd expect to slightly edge Gane on minutes, just because, or maybe more than slightly, like moderately have him edge on minutes, just because he's much more defensively responsible and his output's a bit higher. But I do think in that kind of a kickboxing match, first of all, I think Rozenstruik's the kind of guy that carries enough power that pricing him below 30-35% in general is kind of a dicey proposition in a kickboxing match. And then on top of that, look, like, I wouldn't favor him to win a decision. Obviously, I'd make him a heavy underdog. But I don't think it's a case where it was like Blades Lewis last week, where I was pretty confident, unless Blades kicked Lewis in the nuts 4 times, he was going to win a decision. Like, there was virtually no way Lewis could win a decision. Whereas Rozenstruik, like, it's not impossible to imagine a couple rounds that are close where maybe he gets off on some good kicks, keeps the volume relatively close, and lands 1 or 2 big shots to steal rounds, right? Like, that's not a crazy thing to imagine. I don't think it'll happen. But so, like, all of that said, like, if it was a kickboxing match, I'd be betting Rozenstruik at the number where it's at right now, just because I do think the power in and of itself is enough to make this number a little wide. And, maybe there are areas where he could keep up on minutes. But the grappling part, at the end of the day, look, I bet over in part because all the tape of Gane on his back, or of Rozenstruik on his back, is horrible. And he looked horrible on his back against Overeem. For whatever reason, Overeem had a stroke in round 2 and just decided not to throw Gane down and sit there on top of him in side control for 3.5 minutes. Like, I don't know what happened or what went through his head, but he didn't. And it's like, that's hard to get out of my head. And, like, there's a part of me that thinks Gane's not reliable to land takedowns because, look, he attempted 3 and went 3 for 3 against Mays, but then only attempted 1 against Bozer and didn't attempt any, I don't believe, against JDS. But at the same time, kind of to Luke's point, he seems like an intelligent guy. And it's one of those things where it's such a massive X factor. That's like, if I'm wrong about this, and I make that assumption about Rozenstruik, and then he comes out and attempts 8-9 takedowns, well, I just lit my money on fire. So I think the kickboxing is way closer than people think it is. Like, I favor Gane pretty significantly, but I think Rozenstruik's got a path there. But yeah, I think if he goes grapple heavy, it's just such a wide path. I can't play the number where it is now. If he got up to if Rozenstruik got up to the near the plus 300 range, I'd probably stab it, to be honest. But passing for now. Flags, how about you?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add to this fight, I'm seeing a lot of love for the fight going the distance, and I just don't get it. Just because Gane's only had 7 fights, and 6 of those have ended inside the distance, and then Rozenstruik's conversely 11 fights, 10 inside the distance. 10 and 11. But yeah, we haven't really seen either of them. I mean, this is the first time that Rozenstruik's going to be in a 5-round fight, which I think is going to be extended outside of the first round, against Gane, who just kind of full blitz mode on him. And then similarly with Gane, this is his first 5-round fight. And so I think the grappling edge, like we talked about, is huge. If he pursues the takedowns, and then the sub wouldn't be crazy if he's trying to pursue the finish aggressively. And then similarly on the feet, I think Gane has finishing upside. And then I know PayPal mentioned in the chat, Gane is pretty hittable. I mean, JDS was hitting him. Bozer was able to hit him. I don't think he's untouchable. And then with a guy as much power in Big Boy, I think he could KO him. But yeah, I'm not really interested in playing anything. I think the line. I mean, I was looking at the fight ends in KO at -160, but the issue with that is this sub-qualm with Gane. So just overall, it's pass. But I think if I don't mind the under 2.5, to be honest. I think it's at evens now. I don't hate it.
Yeah, actually, kind of to your point, too, it's like we did see Jairzinho go basically 5 rounds with Reem, but Reem is so absurdly low output at this point, whereas Gane is extremely high output. Like, I think Reem attempted 98 strikes in 24 and a half minutes in that fight. Like, that's –
so that's my issue. So that's my issue, too. So, like, on the feet, like, yeah, you said Gane's going to be higher output, and if he's in those same positions as Reem, he probably gets either a ground and pound finish or probably gets in like a rear naked choke.
Yeah, yeah.
I want to just real quick. I want to get your take on that for that fight. For Overeem Rozenstruik, like UFC stats, like both guys apparently landed like 90 significant strikes apiece. I don't know about that.
So
in the fight I watched,
he has Rozenstruik outlanding Reem in that fight.
I disagree with that. I don't think that's accurate.
Yeah. It has Rozenstruik attempting 180 distance attempts to Reem's 76 and outlanding him at distance 68-46.
I don't buy that.
Yeah.
It is a little weird, and I was shocked when I saw it because I was pretty big on Reem there. And it felt like until round 4, like, Jairzinho did fuck all in that fight. Like, it is weird. Yeah. There are a few that are like that. I mean, even, the Vivi DLR fight, and I bet DLR, but they have her as outlanding Vivi in that fight, which seems kind of odd. I guess it's possible, but.
Well, that fight makes a little bit more sense because both girls just threw more. Like, if you optically watch that fight, like, there was more action in that fight than there was. But, like, that was also 3 rounds, 5 rounds. But yeah, you guys know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. Anyway, guys, that'll do it for this week. Luke and I will be back tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, do the DFS show for this. We'll try to sift through this nonsense and see what we can find. Hopefully no one will have back spasms this week right before they're supposed to walk out. But we get to chat about that tomorrow night to ruin my Saturday last weekend. Anyway, guys, thanks for coming out. As always, Luke at SWR_betting, Lags at Lags_the Capper, and myself at John Sturgeon and MMA Fox. Again, guys, for 50% bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000, go to BetOnline, use the promo code CLUBSUB, and please, 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 if you like the show, please drop us a like, please subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Anyway, guys, we'll see you next week, same time. Big card, UFC 259. Anyway, peace, guys. Later.
And Saturday, we might be live.
This Saturday or next Saturday?
This Saturday, maybe. No. I'm maybe down for a live show.
Maybe me and Lags might do it. Maybe me and Lags
might go live. I'll go live with you, but for this?
Exactly. We don't care. It'll be fun. We'll just drink a bunch of beer.
We'll just be shit-faced.
All right. Maybe. We can maybe do that. Maybe we'll go live this week. Anyway, thanks for coming out, guys. Later.